with Julianne Williams. I have a really special guest today. As a matter of fact, you are going to learn something about Donovan Rhoden that many of his friends and family have never been told. Now, Donovan is a motivational speaker, a serial entrepreneur, most importantly, probably the father of 7, and he is a resilience expert. And if you know me, you know resilience is what I really like to teach because we can learn those skills. So he understands the art and science of perseverance. His personal story of resilience has inspired so many people, and he draws on his own experiences to help others overcome their own challenges. So you're going to learn today a little bit about Donovan, like I said, some things that people have never heard. But in his speech about resilience, Donovan shares his personal story of overcome rejection and setbacks in his career. And he teaches us how we can believe in ourselves. And, importantly, if we don't believe in ourselves, nothing can happen. So I'm super excited to share with you today, Donovan Rhoden. And again, this is going to be an impactful day because we are going to learn things about a person that they have not told anybody. What a gift to be able to learn today. So with that, I'm going to bring on Donovan. Good afternoon, Donovan.
Good afternoon, Julian. How are you?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's a privilege.
Well, I was just telling the viewers before we brought you on a little bit about your background. Not a lot, though, because you have so much interesting, information to share with us. But I did share that important to me is always learning the skills of resilience because we know we can learn it. And it's important for us to do that. But I also explained that today is going to be very impactful because you're going to share with us some things that you have not shared with other people before. And as a part of your healing journey, you are going to give us the privilege today of talking to us about how you got through some really difficult situations. So with that, I would like to turn it over to you and ask you to introduce yourself and tell us about your story.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. My name is Donovan Rhoden, as I've said before. I'm a gentleman that was born in St. Mary, Jamaica, the island Jamaica, not Jamaica, Queens. So St. Mary, Jamaica. I migrated to the United States when I was 12 years old, moved to Brooklyn, New York. And it was definitely a culture shock for me, coming from a wide open space with, blue water, the ocean, green grass, and fresh fruit. So to move from that to Brooklyn, New York, it's almost like moving to the concrete jungle, if you will.
Those are exactly the words that were in my mind when you were saying that.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So yeah, with that being said, prior to coming to the United States, my mother had made a sacrifice that I didn't realize later on in my life that was a sacrifice, because she left Jamaica when I was 5 years old. And I hadn't seen her again until I was 12 years old.
Wow.
And then moving to the United States. So at the time, I didn't realize what kind of impact that would have in my life, being separated from my mother for those years. And later on in life, I saw how that manifested itself. However, I learned through resilience that I was actually being resilient as a child, being away from his mother from the age of 5 to 7. So because I had to use my imagination, and I had to remember all the good times that I had with her when she was there from that moment of time. I believe that I was abused as a child. The culture is obviously pretty strict, and I was boarding out with family friends, living not with my family, and forced to do things that physical abuse, not just having to get on your knees and clean floors, and not being able to go and play with your friends as a little 5-year-old wanted to do, getting your butt whooped for like absolutely no reason, it seems like most of the times.
Mm-hmm.
But I was able to, spend a lot of time alone in my thoughts and make toys outside with stones, and just being creative that way, unlike the kids of today.
I know it's so different growing up now.
Yeah. So those times really molded me into the personality that I am today. Now, one of the drawbacks of being away from the guidance of your parents when you're young like that, you seem to pick up with friends that are not necessarily the best friends for you,
I see.
because you're just looking for love, and you're trying to get to a place where you feel safe. And unfortunately, throughout my life, I've gained friends that weren't necessarily the best for me. I've gained good friends too,
Hmm.
but I've gained some friends that brought me into places that weren't necessarily the best place to be. And that started when I got into Brooklyn, and violent place, going to violent schools, and all of those things. So you had to kind of get friends where you felt protected.
Hmm.
But those things weren't necessarily the best for me. So my parents ended up shipping me away to Connecticut to finish up school in Connecticut. So I finished up junior high school there, came back to Brooklyn for a couple of years, went to Prospect Heights High School in Brooklyn, and then getting into issues with people, friends, taking my dad's car on a joyride with friends. They decided to ship me back to New Britain, Connecticut. While in New Britain, Connecticut, I was having a good time there, but I, again, get caught up with friends because now I'm living with my aunt. It's not my parents, and I basically do pretty much what I wanted to do. And I got into some issues with some friends that asked me to do favors for them. I was somehow able to, find my way out of that, and went on to play football and tennis for high school, and moved back to Queens at the time, which is now 1986. And my parents had bought a home in Queens. I guess the moral of this story is I've never really lived around my parents for extended periods of time.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, I knew that you were away from your mom when you were really young. I did not realize that you had several times where you were removed from your primary household, your nuclear family. And so that would create a very hard dynamic as a child, because we're
Yeah,
still children when we're teenagers.
absolutely, absolutely. Uh, being away from them basically society start to raise you, you know.
Right.
And obviously, I wanted to make my family proud. I wanted to make them proud, and I moved upstate New York. Was attending Hudson Valley Community College. Had big dreams of being a civil engineer. Then I took a course in surveying, and we had I think the worst storm of it was the worst storm recorded, the worst snowstorm recorded. I had to be outside doing surveying, and that really turned me off. At the time, at that time, my parents really couldn't afford to send me to school.
Hmm.
So I had to get a job working and doing all those things. I've been working since I was 14 years old. I started off cleaning buses and doing all that kind of stuff, and even working in housekeeping. But yeah, came up to upstate New York, and then I got a job working in housekeeping, and eventually a job working in the lab at Memorial Hospital, which is a local hospital here. Also worked at UPS, so I was doing both of those things, loading trucks, working in the lab while going to school, and then I met my first child's mom in the campus center
Hmm.
at Hudson Valley, and I had my first child at the age of 22, just turned 22. So I quit school at that point and went off to work full time.
Hmm.
I was selling cars, um, and I learned a lot, from selling cars, and working at the hospital and meeting people. Working in the car business definitely showed me that you eat what you kill. It's one of those things where uh, it's not what you've done yesterday. It's definitely what you've done lately.
Hmm.
And The turnover was high. So I had to learn a lot getting out into the real world, having a daughter now to take care of, and these responsibilities. So that definitely had its pluses and its minuses for sure. The pluses were you had to be on it, and you had to
Right.
be willing to put in the time. And so for those reasons, I was able to learn not to. I was able to learn to be independent, to
Hmm.
be an independent earner, if you will, as
Right.
opposed to having a 9 to 5 position in a company. But I did leave the car business for a while and went off to work for Federal Express. I was driving the big Grummins, I was driving straight job trucks and making deliveries, and I thought that would give me a little bit more security. I wanted a paycheck that I could depend on because when I was in the car business, I sat there in the car and I sat in the showroom and I was like, I can't afford this car that I'm selling. So something's wrong with this formula. What's going on here? I
Right.
need a job with benefits and being able to go out and live that American dream that they taught me in school. So I
That's
thought that
right.
was the way to do it, but I
Right.
found out quickly that that wasn't the way to go. And so on my one of my deliveries one day, I met a gentleman at the GE plant in Schenectady, New York, and he was trying to recruit me to a company. The company's name was ACN, American Communication Network, and that was in 1994. Now, I thought he was an Amway guy. You know, he
Yeah.
came to my house on a Sunday, dressed in a suit, and I was like, "Yep, I'm gonna wait for this pitch right now." And I've been down this road before, but it wasn't, and it was a company showing us how to market telecommunication services at the time, which was the time that AT&T, or what they used to call Ma Bell, and they had MCI and Sprint and all those companies.
Oh yeah.
They're all
Those were the days,
those
right?
were the days. They were breaking apart, and so they were no longer a monopoly on the system. And so other resellers came in. One of the companies was a company called LCI, which was a small company, and so their billing thing was they bill you to the next 2 seconds or something like that. So if you spoke on the phone for a minute and even 2 seconds, they were billing you for 2 minutes. I think that's how that went. But LCI would only bill you to the next 2 or 4 seconds, something like that. So that was our pitch. But above and beyond from the product itself, it was the things that I learned in network marketing, the personal growth that I learned in network marketing that really helped me to have successes in other areas, such as real estate. So I was able to get to a top position in the company within a very short period. So I was able to walk away from being a truck driver, and I was making double and triple the amount, and was able to travel all around the country, giving speeches on different stages all around the country. So it was a great experience. The personal growth was incredible, and so I was able to sit in front of some of the most famous speakers today, like Les Brown and Zig Ziglar and Anthony Robbins and all of those guys, And so what I took from that, I took that into real estate because I had a huge following at the time. And so I had huge success in real estate from the time of, I would say, 1997 when I started in real estate. And I remember making my first deal. It was a flip, and I made my first $10,000. And I was home,
Yeah.
here with my
Yeah.
daughter, watching her softball games and going to her basketball games. And I really liked that a lot. So I really dove into real estate and really made a good run at it. And I had a really strong 10-year run at it. The company had made, 7-figure gross sales and all of those things. So it was a good run, but not having financial education, from not your parents didn't have financial education. None of the people around me had financial education. So when you come from a background where you don't have much, you're going to go out there and you're going to spend money on the things that you didn't have that you thought were, hey, this is what I do when I get money.
Right.
So I did all those things. I bought the big homes and I bought the cars. And at that time, I started having more children, and it all seemed like they all came one right after the other. So I had the one daughter for 10 years, and then
Mhm.
within like a 6-year period, 6, 7 year period, I had 6 more children.
Wow.
Yeah. So
What a blessing, though.
it is a blessing. Looking, some people look at that as, well, hey man, you have 7 children, 5 different moms. Man, what, you were a rock star. You were just a partier. You were, you were this and you were that. They have their judgments.
Mhm.
Women that I'll meet sometimes, say, well, you were one busy boy, and other people will say, well, I don't even know how you do it. And so my answer for that was, I just do it, you know, because that's what I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be away from my children for extended periods of time. Now, of course, the dynamics with all of them, I couldn't spend as much time with all of them at the same time as I'd like to,
Right.
because with one living, downstate, and the other one, where his mother wasn't super friendly to the situation or whatever. It has its ups, it has its battles.
Right.
But I always still try to get them together, and they all know each other. And I'm happy to be able to spend as much time with them as most of the time as I can, all the time. And now I'm a proud granddad. But,
Oh.
but I say this much to get into what I wanted to share with the audience and with family members of mine that don't know some of the hits that I've taken over the years. So when the market crashed in 2008, I believe that's when the real estate market started to crash. All I know is that for 10 years, I was able to, purchase a house, sell a house, fix a house. There was never an issue in getting a house, buying a house and not being able to flip out of it. I
Mhm.
never had those issues.
Right.
So, it was always like a conveyor belt. Boom, I can go buy 10 homes at a time and flip out of 10 of them. Whether it's a 6-month process or 4-month process. Anyway, I found myself in a bunch of tough times when when they changed the lending criteria with the banks, and you couldn't have those loans anymore. I believe they call those loans they were paperless. There were basically no financial checking. It was
Right.
stated loans, they call them.
Right.
So most of my clients were stated loan clients, and now everybody had to go to A paper. Well, obviously most people are not A paper, and so that really slowed the business up completely. With no financial education, you're bleeding money when you're living at a level that wasn't really a big deal prior, but now it becomes a huge deal because you don't have that income coming in anymore.
Right.
And so I was losing properties to foreclosure. I even lost my 2 homes that I had built for my children. I lost all of that stuff. And throughout all of that, it was obviously a very stressful moment for me.
Yes.
Uh, but being a street fighter, you just continue to reinvent yourself. And I opened up a credit restoration company. I always figured if you provide a service that people need, you should always be able to make money. And so I
Yes.
opened up a credit restoration service. And later on, being that I had some experience in the car game, but it was one of probably the worst investments that I made, because I just didn't want to. Once I got into it, I was like, oh, I shouldn't have done that.
Yes.
but I was into it because anybody that knows me know that paperwork is not one of my fortes. I really don't like paperwork. I'm a guy that can put the deal together, but
Right.
then I need to walk away and hand it off to someone else and take it from there with all the administrative parts that goes along with that.
Sure. Yes.
So I did find myself stuck having to do all this paperwork, being overwhelmed, buying the cars at the auction, making sure they go through the shop, retailing the cars, dealing with the customer, opening the doors every morning. I was like, this is way too much. Anyway, I was financing all of that out of my own pocket, didn't have any lines of credit, and so on and so forth. So I started to search for investors to floor plan the cars and to uh, finance real estate flips for me. I started putting the word out there. At the same time, I was fighting foreclosure on my property. And I had gotten to a point where I started to do my own defense on the foreclosure, because at this point I ran out of money and I felt like the attorneys were just basically, hey, once you're out of money, see you later.
Right.
So I started learning my own defenses in foreclosure, and I was having success for quite some time defending the properties. But I believe, and I won't say this, I won't state that I know the facts, but I believe that because I was having so much success at it, uh, I pissed somebody off that in the higher ups, and
Oh,
so I had found myself in some hot water with the federal government. And the way that happened was they came to my car lot. I wasn't there at the time, but I had someone that was working on some paperwork for me. They were there, and they came and left a card. So I had breakfast with the guy, and he shook my hand. I never forget it. He says, "You shake the hand of a rich man, you become rich.
oh,
Shake the hand of a poor man, you become poor." I said, well, I must be in the right place. I must be shaking the hand of a rich man. And that's how he broke the ice. But at the time, I really didn't see the setup coming. But it was a man of the Middle Eastern descent. And we sat down, had breakfast, and he told me his story of how he owned gas stations and property in different parts of the country, including New York. Mentioned some people that we both knew, mutual friends. Oh, okay. And I'm thinking to myself while this is happening that, oh man, God is good, because I'm a very spiritual guy.
mm-hmm.
I'm not really a religious guy at all, even though I grew up Baptist. My dad's a Baptist guy, and yeah. So I always believe in the powers that be.
Mm-hmm.
I know that this thing doesn't just work by itself. I
Right.
know that I can't just get up and move my hands and my feet. I just can't get out of bed by myself. This is a higher power at work. And
For
so
sure.
once I realized that, I became more spiritually grounded.
Mm-hmm.
And so these things started happening. I had this relationship with these strangers that I've never known before. That went on for about 6 to 8 months of wine and dine. Hey, Donovan, we love guys like you. We want to invest in your business. Okay, great. This is what I've been looking for. Okay, well, we do most of our business in cash, because I own laundromats and I own these cash businesses. But we do business in our culture. We do business in cash all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking to myself, maybe that's true. I do know some, folks that are of Middle Eastern culture or Indian culture, and they do a lot of stuff in cash. And
Mm-hmm.
so I didn't think anything of it. So at some point, they were going to do the first investment with me, which was $15,000, and this was for me to purchase cars. Then, so I took the $15,000 in cash, and I put the money in my bank account, in my bank account. And so I was waiting around for a while, because we were supposed to go and start looking at properties for us to buy and for me to fix them up and get them on the market and so on. And so that took a little while. Then I got a phone call from his friend, who he put in place because he traveled a lot. And at this time he was in Dubai. And so another guy that I had met over dinner that came in, and so he was handling the business for him. So he came up and we sat down, and he said to me, "Hey, I need you to send a check to XYZ cleaning company." And now, so I start to get a little bit on the fence about, well, first and foremost, why are you giving me cash? And
Right.
second, why are you not giving me a certified check? And third, why am I sending you a check?
Right. And so did your gut
Yeah,
begin to
so
have some different feelings?
my gut feeling was like, all right, this is not good. It's not good. But it was over time that I said, all right, all right, maybe you need to take a chance. Maybe you need to not be so scared. They did seem like regular guys, and we've been talking and carrying on for 6 to 8 months over dinner, just planning and planning and planning. All right. So I wrote out a check. I wrote out a couple of checks to their cleaning company, and that was it. They said, when I come back, I'm going to have $30,000 for you, and that's for the first initial. I want you to go out and buy some cars, and then I want you to start looking at properties to put deposits on and so on. Okay, not a problem. Came up $30,000 in cash. I put them up, but now I started to get a little nervous. I did start to get a little nervous, I must say.
Right.
But I did put some of the money in the bank, and some of the monies they get, hey, just send me money here. Okay, didn't think anything of it. I'm gonna have $60,000 when I come back, and so on and so forth. Okay, that's fine. So I got a little bit comfortable. It looked like it was working fine, but I remember the day. It was July 22nd, 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And I was meeting them. I was in my office, and I had to go meet them for lunch. And I was supposed to collect $60,000 from them. There's a little more to the story. The guys told me that one of the guy that came told me he was an ex. He was in the drug business, and he was trying to get out. So the initial person that I met was a good friend of his, and he's had nothing but success working with this guy, managing his properties, handling business for him, and that's the way that he was able to get out. Now, I had a friend of mine who had been in the business ever since I've known him, but he was a nice guy, and I never ventured into that business. I've never done drugs myself. I was never into that type of thing, but being sometimes when you come from a background where there's people that exist like this, just because I was having success in the corporate world per se, that I didn't want to leave. I never left those. I didn't feel that it was right. I felt strongly it wasn't right for me to ignore and walk away or turn my nose up to my friends that I had known for a long time, just because that's what they did. As long as I stayed in my lane and I didn't deal with situations like that, I felt that I'd be fine. And that seemed to work for many years. Now, it just so happened that my friend asked me to, hey, Donovan, I know you know a lot of people. You're well connected, you're well networked and so on. And I need to scale my business. I need a better price on my product. I was like, okay. It just so happened that this guy that I'm doing some work with happened to be ex guy that did that. If you want, I'll ask him for you. But if he wants to meet with you or you want to meet with him, that's on you guys. You know that I have nothing to do with those type of business. He goes, yeah, I'll meet him. I have no problems meeting him. Okay, so I mentioned it to the guy over dinner, not knowing that the guy's recording me with a cell phone that just looks like your regular cell phone is sitting on the table. The whole conversation is being recorded. He's wearing a Yankee hat, but the Yankee hat's mic'd up, and all that's being recorded with video and everything. And so having, what I was trying to accomplish with these people was to get an opportunity to get back on my feet. When I say get back on my feet, kind of get back close to where I was when I was flipping real estate and making myself, 30, 40, 50,000, $100,000 a month. That's really, it's not that I wasn't willing to put in work to do so. I was willing to put in the work. But I did realize after they came and arrested me that day on July 27th, that I did take a bite of the forbidden fruit. I did fall for that trick. That hat in the bag. I did fall for it. And so now what am I going to do now that this has happened? I'm being charged with several felonies. I'm looking at, facing a lot of time away from my 7 beautiful children, my parents, my dad, who just turned 101 years old.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
And my mom, 94 years old. If they ever found out about this, especially my mom, man, I don't think she can survive it.
Right.
So what am I going to do? When that happened, I really had to dig within to, my spiritual groundedness really came into play at that point. Because at this point, I realized that they got you, whether it was a a setup that you didn't think it was warranted, because I'm saying to myself, I said to the agent, why come after a guy like me? I'm really just out here trying to hustle and take care of my children and keep a
Mm-hmm.
roof over their head. Why come after a guy like me?
Right.
He goes to me, Donovan, it's not personal. You fit the profile. That's what he said to me. I fit the profile because, I wasn't a guy that walked around in suits and all of those things.
Right.
So maybe I had a little rough looking edge, or I don't know what it was. Maybe I looked a little street.
I was going to say, did they ever explain the profile?
Say that again. Say that again.
Did they ever explain to you what your profile was?
No, they never did. He just
Okay.
said to me, those guys are built like, they're almost like machines. Yeah, they're personable, but they're all about the mission. And the mission is to get you arrested, get you in their grips. And once you're in their grips, obviously, and they throw the book at you and look at what you're facing, hey, you're gonna have to make some choices. Am I going to be looking at 40 years of my time in jail? Would you even make it? At the time I was 50 years old, or just turned 50 years old when that happened. So I'm looking at that kind of time. I'm like, you really have no choice in that moment. So I had to when I went home, there was no bail or anything like that. They let me out. They took my cars and all of that kind of stuff, but then ended up giving me a car to go home in, one of my cars. They still kept one of them for a while. They went through it. I guess they needed to search it and go through it and do all that. Anyway, after they did all that, they ended up returning that car. But that first night of being home, I can remember to myself thinking about my children, thinking about my parents, thinking about my siblings. If you know anything about Jamaican families, or just that culture, it's a very proud culture.
Okay.
We pride ourselves on being hard workers, being educated. And if you're not educated, your ambition alone and your drive will get you some sort of success. You're not a lazy person. It's very rare that you're going to meet someone in our culture that's just lazy for no reason, right?
Yes.
So the shame of the family name is what really I was so concerned about. I was really concerned about my parents finding out and the stress that it would cause. The friends that I have who now have become most of them are mostly corporate guys and came from not a lot as well, but they didn't have the same lane that I had. But they were successful in their own right, proud and so on. So I have to be around these guys in our little cookouts and meetings and, boys' night out. And I'm sitting there and I have a lot of good friends also that are attorneys, even judges. And I have to be around these folks and pretend that, I have friends that are detectives, decorated detectives and law enforcement and all of this stuff. So they don't know. Of course, they're not expecting, they know what kind of guy I am over the years. They're not expecting me to be a guy that's now a felon. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but with prayer and meditation, being in a quiet place, I had to learn to give that which I could not control to my maker.
Yes.
To the universe. I had to give it up to the universe. I had to give it up to God, whatever anyone wants to call their relationship with God or the universe. I had to give that thing that I could not control over to God. I had to stop letting all those thoughts come in and out of my mind, where you're bouncing around and the heart rate just beating fast. I can remember the day that I had to go in for sentencing, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I literally thought I was going to have a heart attack until I entered into that courtroom, and I had to go into a place of silence. And I said, and I prayed for the best. I said, God, I know you've got me. You know my true heart. You know who I am. And even if I had to go to jail, I know that it wasn't the end of me, if you will.
Right.
And so I was able to come out of that on 5 years probation and 6
What a miracle.
6 months of house arrest and 5 years probation. But if I didn't have that spiritual groundness, I don't know how I would have done it. Like I said, the first time that that happened, the night before the trial, I was, my heart was beating so fast because I literally did not know. That's the one thing with the federal government. You do not know what's going to happen. It's not like the state where they make a deal ahead of time. So when you walk in to the court in the state, you already know if you're going or you're not going.
I see.
And so parts of what saved me, because I was never in trouble before, you
Mm-hmm.
know, so that saved me. Obviously, recommendations from people that knew who I really was, that I shared it with, and obviously some money, for the right attorney. That saved me, but it really took a beating on my soul. It really took a beating on my thoughts about myself, my self-esteem,
Right.
and so though that's really what I wanted to share with people without getting into too much details. It would just go on for way too long. There's so much details to it. So I'm gonna let you, ask me whatever it is that you'd like to ask, and we can kind of go from there.
Well, I'll tell you, that is a compelling story. And so, one thing that I wanted to ask you, and I think you answered it a couple of times, with a couple of things. That what did you learn from this experience? And number one, I heard you say you learned to rely on God and to take
Mhm.
your spirituality very seriously, that it was something that you knew was going to sustain you. You also said that you relied on other people, that you used your network, whether that been family or friends, for support. And then the last thing is that you analyzed what resources that you had available to you to figure out how to use them best in this particular situation.
Right.
What is there anything else that you learned that you can share with? I mean, those are huge. But is there anything else I'm missing that you could share with the viewers around a learning? Because after that, I have a really interesting question, two really interesting questions that are going to take us back to your childhood.
Well, what I did learn from this experience was this. One, I've always been someone to help people. First and foremost, I've always been a people person. I've always given people the benefit of the doubt. And from this experience going through it and listening, I've always been a good listener, but I listen to friends. I listen to friends of mine who might be having some challenges at home with their child, or with a relationship, or just something that was traumatizing that happened to them. And I was able to help people to take a look at the situation in a different way. Because they say when you change the way that you look at a situation, the situation changes. And that is so true.
I agree.
And so with that, I've been able to help people and consult with for people because of my general experiences that I've gone through, my own trauma, and how I've been able to be resilient through all of that.
So, I do want to, and that's such a really, I love that you help people by using the experiences that you have had to show them ways, or to help them find a different way to think. Because really, changing the way we think about something can be very difficult, but it is important because it changes the way that not only we behave, but the way we react. But I really was thinking about your childhood.
Mhm.
So some people know that my husband took his life when he was 38. My children were 7 and 3. And when he passed away, we had some financial things I had to work through. I ended up taking a job that required extensive travel, and my children stayed with my parents. And I got a lot of judgment from people about having to travel for a living. And now my children are grown. So I love to hear about children who had separation from their parents, and to say you said that's where you learned resilience.
Yeah.
What were some of the things you did as a child to build resilience? And then after that, what I want to ask you about is, if you're the parent who has to separate from your children because of circumstances, whatever they are, what can you do best for your child to make that separation as I'm not going to say easy as possible, because it's never easy, to make
Mhm.
it in a way that can be as least difficult?
Well, one, like I said, the separation, what my mother was doing was trying to get a better opportunity for her children. And
Hmm.
I know she came here and she cleaned toilets and she did all of those things for years in order to make that happen. However, the damage from being separated as the child, wondering why did my mother leave me, or where are
Hmm.
the rest of my family, where's my siblings, where are they, I'm stuck here with people that are not my family. And so that's trauma for a child.
It is.
You're not feeling the love. There's no hugs from your mama because there's no hugs like your mama's hugs, right?
True.
And so I wasn't getting any of those hugs. And I believe today with relationships, like I've never been married. And I'm not saying that I haven't had some meaningful relationships in my life. I have. And I'm not saying that I can't make myself vulnerable to love because I have done that too. However, I've just never, when it comes to relationships, and I think this is from being separated from my mom for those periods of years that I get close and then I find a way somehow to sabotage this relationship,
Right.
because I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to be hurt.
Right.
But as a child, the trauma, being resilient is tough. You're doing it, but you don't even know you're doing it
Hmm.
because you're trying to stay as positive as you can. You're being creative. You make it. You're playing with stuff outside, and you're just making things happen because till it's time to go to bed, and then you're going to do it over again tomorrow, the next day, and so on. I think that what a parent could do when they're separated from their child is to try to communicate with that child as much as possible.
Okay.
Now, back in those days when I was growing up, having a phone was a luxury.
Yes.
So we didn't have a phone in the home where I live, and so I would speak to my mother maybe 2 or 3 times a year.
Oh, wow.
Other than that, I wouldn't speak to her. So we'd go to a family member's house, like a distant cousin, and they had a phone. They had a successful paving business, and they had the nice home and pool and all that stuff. So we, from time to time, would pay them for the phone call. And so
Right.
me and my brother and sister would go over, and we would be able to speak to my mom on the phone. And so at the time, yeah, my dad still lived in Jamaica, but he
Hmm.
didn't live obviously in the house where I was.
Right.
He would stay there a few nights a week, but
Hmm.
we had a home in a different town where my mom
Right.
was. And so yeah, I would always hear my dad arguing with my mother. Why don't you come home? You must have a man over there and all this other stuff.
Oh.
And as a grown man now, I can understand what he was arguing about. But he was there to make a sacrifice for us, and at some point, it did end up that we all ended up in America. You
Hmm.
know, but if she had the opportunity to speak to me and the rest of us more often, I know she would, because
Right.
I know that's the sacrifice that she was making. However, it did create this bond. It did create a breakage in a bond that should be there.
Right.
That's not there.
Right.
Though my mother's, I'm her last child. So until this day, when I call her and say, I live in upstate New York, which is about 3 hours from where my mother lives. Until this day, if I call her and I say, "Mom, I'm coming down to visit for dinner. I'm coming for Sunday dinner," she makes sure that I have this special dinner that I like to have when I come. And so my other siblings always poke fun at that. The last one, and it's funny, but yeah. So I believe the way that parents who are happen to be away from their children, especially with technology today, if you have to be away from your children, I would definitely make a strong effort to speak to them on a daily, if not every other day, to keep that gap, close as you can. It's never the same as going home to your parents every day.
Right.
It's never the same, but
Correct.
I would say that it's definitely use that technology to help your child. As I got older, if I didn't have developed that spiritual relationship and be grounded with that, knowing that all things are possible,
Hmm.
there's no way I would have made it. I would have ended up in the penitentiary, or I died of a heart attack, or I would have been I'm going to die to something else, you know?
Right.
So being able to correct the ship was from being spiritually grounded, meditating, and having that relationship with the Most High.
Yes. Well, the last thing I always ask my guests, and I love that advice. Because I look back, obviously, and as parents, and I'm sure you do too, you always think, could I have done this better? Could I have done that better? Should I, and so I always try to learn from other people who have had experiences and to share that. That's part of the reason of this show. So thank you for sharing that. What,
Absolutely.
if you were going to say one thing, because you've had an incredible life. I mean, highs and lows, and just such a large difference of people in your life in terms of socioeconomic and professional, and cultures and country versus city. I mean, it just really, you have experienced so much.
Yes.
So if you thought of all of those things, what would you say the one thing that you did to step into your life?
Wow. And that's such a powerful, strong question. I would say the one thing that I did to step into my life was to learn to forgive myself and
Wow.
learn to forgive the people that are critical of you. Learn not to learn not to internalize what people have to say about you. This is why it's so important to have this spiritual groundedness, because you realize after a while that you're going to have haters in your life, especially if you're a mover and shaker. Just
Mm-hmm.
forget about it. If when I decided that I wanted to become a public speaker as just a consultant, as as a means to help other people, and have some effect from my life on other people. Uh, there are naysayers out there. Oh, here he goes again. You know,
Yes.
here he goes again. This guy just thinks that he can just do whatever. You know, and he's a this and he's a that. I don't want to use some of the words that I've
You're
heard
right.
people have called me out there. But if you know yourself, people have called you names. Oh, he's a dumbass. Oh, he's a douchebag. He's whatever, right? A moron. He's this. He's that. He's a scam artist. He's whatever. That people are going to call you derogatory names. And I'll say this much, Julian, from being a larger size black man. When I come into a room, I can sense intimidation, especially from white males.
Mm.
I can sense intimidation. I can sense that I'm being sized up, being judged, and I don't look at life that way. I look at
Right.
life as I don't see the color. I don't. That's not how I look at life.
Mm-hmm.
But if you see behind me, Bob Marley is one of my. I'm one of Bob Marley's biggest fans. He doesn't
I
know.
saw that picture when we met the first time. I saw you had Bob Marley back there, and I have my own stories on that are really interesting that you have him behind you. It made me really feel like this was meant to be.
Yeah, well, in Jamaica, I went to school with Bob Marley's daughter, Sharon
Okay.
Marley. And so we shared some experiences there. But the influences of Bob is mostly based in spiritual groundedness.
Mm-hmm.
You listen to his music and all of those things. But the biggest thing, getting back to what you were asking me, is letting that go in one ear and out the other. Don't let it define who you are, because it's not who you are. It's not. It's the same as experiencing trauma. It's the same as experiencing, bad things that happen to you. Start thinking, oh no, I'm a felon. I'm just a loser. I'm a anything derogatory. You have to learn to realize that you're God's child first and foremost, and you can't do anything without Him. So you must focus on Him first, and have an attitude of gratitude. And that's the first thing that I do. Is for some reason, I pray in the shower better than I pray outside. And like the shower just brings me some peace, and that's
Mm-hmm.
where I do my prayer. And the first thing is I'm thankful for getting up. out of this bed every day. When I speak to my 101-year-old father, the first thing he says to me, because people are always asking me, hey, Dad, what does your dad do to be able to live to 101 years old? And I said, well, Dad, you want to share that with some of these folks so I can share that story? And he says, son, I've been asked that question many times. And the first thing is, I give thanks to God for the blessings that he's bestowed upon me and my family. It's
Oh,
God that does it. It's not me. He must have seen something I've done good. And
yes.
so for that reason, he's given me this long life. And I mean, it's so powerful to
It is.
hear him say that,
Yeah.
and it is such a blessing to be able to have these conversations with a 101-year-old man. Because when we had a big party for him last year, we had a big celebration when he turned 100. We, my cousins and I, my brothers and sisters, we had to recognize that time as being not normal. This is not normally what people are coming together for at 100 years old. They're
That's right.
usually coming together for a funeral.
That's right.
So we have to be so thankful for every moment in time, because the truth is that every moment in time is a miracle. We don't know if you're going to be gifted the next 2 or 3 minutes from now.
That's right.
And so that's what I have to, that's what I like to leave with anyone who's having any issues internalizing what society and what the world has, instilled in them, is not to internalize these negative thoughts. That's why it's very important to get in a quiet place. I don't care if you feel like it's hard. You have to try to get 5 minutes of being thankful, being in a quiet place and trying to get the clutter out of your mind, and realizing first that without spiritual groundedness, you cannot make it. You cannot control certain things. And once you recognize that, the Most High is here for those things, and you can put that on his shoulders, and things will be a lot better. And today, for those reasons, a lot better things are happening in my life. It's not all glory, but I can see a better direction of where I'm being guided. And so I realized that these things didn't happen to me, they happened for me.
Right.
So that's really the best part of the message, is to happen, that things are happening for you. They're not happening to you.
Well, I feel very inspired by that. I actually needed to hear that today, and I'll tell you offline why. But I will tell you that is a beautiful message. You inspired me. I feel more grounded after our conversation. And so, how can other people find you? Because your message is amazing. You have the ultimate story of the American dream and overcoming difficulty and finding a way through. And obviously spirituality, it's very important to me, got you there. But how do people find you to come and tell your story as a speaker at one of their events, or
Today,
whatever they are doing where they need someone to come and inspire others?
well, today I've just started to put together my website, that you can go there and go into the contact. It's DonovanRhoden.com, or DonovanBRhoden.com. I'm sorry. So you can go to DonovanBRhoden.com, and it'll say that the page is being launched soon. But you can contact me there, or you can also contact me via my email, which is talking, like we're talking right now, the number 2 people@gmail. And I'm also on LinkedIn. So yeah, those are the 3 ways. I'd say the best way is to shoot me an email, talkingtopeople@gmail, or through the website. And as I started working on my book. So I'll give people more updates. But right now I am available to speak to crowds of any magnitude, any size, any magnitude. I'm an open book. But the biggest thing about the open book is what I can leave with you. I believe that will inspire you to get into a better place.
Well, you've done that for me today. And with that said, I hope you will come back and talk to us when your book is published.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
That would be wonderful. Well, everyone, I want to thank Donovan for coming and sharing with us today, being vulnerable and authentic, because we don't even know the parts people don't know. He does. But what I know is everything he said hit my heart. And also, I can tell that those are such sensitive matters that sharing them took so much courage. We appreciate, Donovan, that you would choose us to share that story and to inspire us to do better as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Again, join me on Step Into Your Life on Phoenix TV. You can find us on the app on Apple TV, Fire TV, or Roku. And I am excited and hope you join me again as we journey together.